Why you wouldn't survive a day in medieval times. Imagine your modern life disappearing in a flash. No soft pillows, no warm showers, no scrolling social media with a coffee in hand. Instead, you're thrust into the brutal, unforgiving world of the Middle Ages, a place so harsh that even a single day would leave you desperate to escape. We've grown accustomed to comforts we barely notice. But back then, every moment was a struggle. From the food you choked down to the air you breathed, medieval life was a relentless challenge. Let's explore why you wouldn't last 24 hours in that grim era. Food bland, gritty, and sometimes deadly. Let's start with what you'd eat. Forget the lavish feasts of Hollywood fame with nights tearing into roasted pheasant. For most people, food was a monotonous, risky affair. Peasants relied on pottage, a watery slop of boiled vegetables cooked in the same unwashed pot for days. It was less a meal and more a survival tactic, often flecked with dirt or bugs. Bread was the backbone of every diet, but it wasn't the light, airy stuff we know. Medieval bread was heavy, dark, and rough ground with stones that left tiny bits of rock in every bite. People didn't have tough teeth by luck, they earned them chewing through what felt like a gravel sandwich. Worse still, that bread could kill you. Rye flour often carried ergot, a toxic fungus that triggered wild hallucinations, searing pain, or even death. Some say it sparked the witch trials, with whole villages losing their minds over a bad loaf. So while you're pointing fingers at your neighbor for casting spells, it might just be the baker's fault. Meat was a rare treat. When it showed up, it was usually spoiled, coated in spices if you were lucky, or eaten with gritted teeth if you weren't. Dropped it on the floor. No problem. It was still good after 5 days, not 5 seconds. Water was a gamble too. Rivers and wells were dumping grounds for waste. Instead, everyone drank ale or beer, weak, cloudy brews, safer than the filth in the streams. Adults downed about 8 pints daily, and kids started sipping at age 5. No one needed a tavern. They needed something that wouldn't poison them. Fish came dried or salted, reeking after days of travel, unless you lived by the sea. One whiff could turn your stomach. Your medieval diet was a mix of boredom and danger, and it only gets worse from here. Sanitation. A stinking nightmare. If the food didn't ruin you, the lack of a proper bathroom would. Most folks used a chamber pot, a crude bucket stashed under the bed. When it filled up, you'd dump it yourself or wait for a collector. Where did it go? Often straight out the window, splattering the street below. In towns, people shouted, "Garde low, watch out for the water," as a heads up for the cascade of filth. Some places banned daytime dumping, but the streets stayed foul regardless. In castles, you'd find guardrobes, stone seats with holes that dropped waste down the walls. At Dover Castle, one chute fell 70 feet to the ground. Royalty had golden crowns, but their toilets were just glorified pits. Out in public, open latrines over rivers or ditches served as facilities swarming with flies and stench. Gong farmers had the grim task of shoveling out cesspits, hauling waste beyond the city at night. The smell stuck to them like a curse, banning them from polite company. They earned decent coin, 4 times a laborer's wage, but no fortune could scrub away that odor. Toilet paper didn't exist. Leaves, moss, or a bare hand did the job. The rich might use wool scraps, but that was the height of luxury. The Romans had sponges on sticks. Medieval folks forgot that trick. After guzzling ale all day and dodging human waste in the streets, you'd be dreaming of a modern flush. Work relentless and soul-crushing. Life wasn't just dirty, it was exhausting. Most people were peasants slaving on noble-owned land from dawn to dusk. Their days were a cycle of toil wake and darkness work until night collapse and do it again until they died. Farmers wrestled wooden plows through rocky soil, sowed seeds by hand, and reaped with dull sickles. Harvest season meant 16-hour shifts under a blazing sun. A peasant burned over 4,000 calories daily. Modern gyms couldn't compete with that misery. Other trades were no better. Blacksmiths choked on forge smoke, their lungs blackened by fumes and their skins scarred by sparks. Tanners soaked hides in urine and lime, their hands stained and noses assaulted. Kids as young as 7 started as apprentices, working 6 or 7 days a week for over a decade before earning a title. The desperate took worse jobs. Link boys lit the way with torches for nighttime travelers, while pure finders scooped dog dung to sell to leather workers. Pay was a pittance. A laborer might earn 2 pennies a day, barely enough for bread. There was no safety net, no weekends, just endless drudgery. Bodies broke down fast, and when they did, medicine made things worse. Medicine primitive and perilous. Catch a cough today and you'd grab some tea. Back then it could be your death sentence. Without germ theory or antibiotics, sickness was a roll of the dice. People blamed miasmas, bad air, or unbalanced humors, blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The cure: bloodletting. Barbers slashed veins or stuck leeches on you sometimes, 70 at once to fix fevers, headaches, anything. It often killed faster than the illness. Child mortality was 30% before age 5, and adults rarely hit 40. The Black Death alone erased half of Europe. Teeth rotted from sugarless diets, and no brushing dentists pulled them with pliers, no anesthetic. Treatments were poison mercury for syphilis, arsenic for fevers, all with deadly side effects. Bathing was suspect. People thought it opened pores to disease, so they stayed filthy. Lice were a fact of life, combed out with bone tools. Survival was a miracle, not a given. Justice brutal and biased. The law was a terror trap. Rules changed by region, and ignorance was no excuse. Steal a crust and you might lose a hand. In England, 200 crimes meant execution. Chop a tree in the King's Woods and you'd hang. Trials were savage. Carry a hot iron 9 steps. Clean healing proved innocence. Infection meant guilt. Or dunking sink and you're pure float and you're dead. Either way you lost. Executions drew crowds like fairs. Hanging was quick. Drawing and quartering was a grotesque show. Dragged, hanged, gutted, beheaded, and hacked apart. Nobles paid fines or hired champions for combat trials. Peasants got nothing. Jails were dank holes. Starve unless kin fed you. Torture twisted confessions out with racks or spiked chairs. For petty crimes, stocks or ducking stools brought shame and rotten tomatoes. Justice was a butcher, not a judge. Warfare blood. Mud and madness. Wars weren't noble quests. They were slaughterfests. The 100 Years' War lasted 116. Full armor was for lords. Foot soldiers had cloth or leather. Swords were elite. Most swung axes or pitchforks. Longbows rained death-warping archers' spines over time. At Towton, 28,000 fell in hours, 1% of England's men. Disease outkilled blades, spread by filthy camps. Villages burned, crops torched, civilians starved. Sieges turned desperate Paris. In 885 saw people eat pets, and worse. Glory was a lie. War was ruin. Daily life. A grubby, grim existence. Towns reeked of garbage guts and sweat. Butchers tossed offal in streets. Folks wore herb sachets against the funk. Baths were biannual, at best clothes lasted until they shredded. Homes were one-room hovels shared by all. Fun was sparse executions, bear-baiting, or a rare juggler. Born a peasant, 90% of people you stayed one. Superstition reigned. Every storm was a hex. News crawled by foot. Life was short, smelly, and bleak. Modernity spoils us. The Middle Ages were a gauntlet of filth, fear, and fatigue. Next time your internet lags think you'd crumble in a day back then.